Here we go. Okay, can we hear? Uh-oh. You're on mute.
You guys hear me now?
Yep.
Sorry, what
That
was
was
that?
fun.
I didn't hear you.
That was fun.
Okay. So I learned today that I did not know this, if you don't have a flat wall behind you, the backgrounds don't work. My wall's not flat, that's why it's a little wonky, but
That's okay. It looks geometrically pretty.
I don't like how it cuts my head off and my hair. It freaks me out.
Let me change my background. So is Coda having the issues with their background?
No, Katie.
Oh, Katie?
That's what I thought. Katie, yeah, I have Katie down as having it. Oh, Coda is too.
What?
Yeah, it's Katie. I haven't signed on yet, so I don't know. I'm not sure. Dennis is combing. Are you combing your hair? Are you doing your last minute preps there?
Oh yeah. If you look good, you feel good.
How to get it?
That's right.
Also, Cynthia, your mic sounds a little quiet.
I sound quiet?
Yeah, a little bit.
I think it's because my.
I don't know if that's just on my end though.
Is this better?
Slightly.
Crystal, do I sound quiet to you?
It sounds like you are just a bit removed from the computer.
Okay, I'm gonna plug in my webcam and use that mic because that has a really good mic.
Okay.
Okay.
That usually picks me up better. And I'll just attach it and use my camera. See, I'm glad I got on early so we could figure all this out. Katie's trying to get in. I'll let her in just a second. Okay. All right. Okay.
Hey, Katie.
Hey.
Hello, Katie.
Hi, how are you? Is this better?
Slightly.
This better?
Okay. There it goes.
I mean, it's louder.
Okay. It's louder, but it's not better.
I mean, the quality is okay, but I'd rather take hearing you over the quality.
Okay. I'm wondering if you're picking me up on two different mics.
All right, Cynthia, you said first names only, right? I cannot hear you now.
Yes. Oh, no.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, nothing's in there.
Now?
I can hear
Yes,
you,
you can hear me now.
but
Is
it's
it soft again?
super, super like a church mouse quiet.
Now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I need to change my name. Yes, I would just do first names. Don't even think about it. Sorry, I'm yelling at my cat.
Oh, okay.
She has this thing when I'm on the computer. She wants to crawl across the little laptop and lay on here and turn her little motor on, so she's purring.
Aw.
Katie, your hair looks very pretty. Oh, I can't hear you, Katie. Good thing we all
Growing
got.
up in early.
Oh no.
Okay, I'm getting some emails. Gonna turn that off.
I drink some water.
Hear me
Yes.
now?
Softly, but yes.
Katie, you have to tell us what's going on with your background. You are our tech person.
Yeah, I know. I've tried everything. But I also need my computer that I have the virtual background on is not working right now
Oh, I
either.
got you.
So we're gonna have to download it from the website again.
Okay.
Crystal, can you see the polls this time?
I can.
Perfect. Okay.
I can.
And it is really dark in this room. I hate that.
I can't tell.
Huh?
I said I can't tell.
Oh, I know. Just for me, it's hard to see. I need to put a lamp in here. So
Oh.
actually, but I think I'm out of plugins.
I want to peek at the polls, but I don't want to launch them because I think you only get one time to launch, right?
Right.
But I can see that you have poll question 1, 2, and 3. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, no problem. Oh, it was easy peasy. All right. So I'm going to warn everybody now. There is no way I can go anything longer than an hour without having to pee. So if I disappear for 5 minutes, I'll be right back. See, now if I turn it on so I can see, I look all weird. Oh, well, I'll look weird. Wonder if okay, I don't know where Coda is. Sometimes she doesn't get off till right. Ooh, look at Katie going.
This is the problem that I have.
I want to do that. Oh, that works.
I've tried everywhere in my house. This is how it is. I don't know if it's the quality of my camera that's the problem. That's the only thing I can think of because I've tried everything else and I've Googled everything and they don't. There's no suggestions on it.
Katie, what is the when you click on the let me go with you. So if you're choosing your virtual background and you click on what color is the image of your background, what color did it give you?
What it says manually pick the color background and detected. Yeah, it let me pick, like I picked my wall and my background, so it's kind of like a beige color.
Okay.
There is no code.
I think she just needs the link.
And I know you get that you normally get that grain through, the glasses through, and teeth through if the background doesn't distinguish you. So if you have something that's green that you can put behind you.
I know there's nothing, like I'm trying to think. There's nothing besides me if I go outside.
Oh, that
I even no.
No.
I tried against even my bed frame because my bed frame's like a dark brown,
Uh-huh.
and that didn't help.
So I see there's a couple, Luna's trying to get in, but I'm going to wait to let anybody in until right at 5:30. And it's really no big deal, Katie, if you can't get your background to work. I don't want you stressing. It was just a fun little idea. I don't want anybody freaking out.
Yeah.
Bless you.
Okay. I'm going to see if I can go through my regular camera. You guys still hear me okay? Oh, that's definitely not a good picture then.
Oh, little cat.
Yeah, she's got up here. She a bad cat. She a little asshole.
I see your Instagram story, yo. Believe me, I know.
She she just want to say hi. She all like in the camera. She thinks you guys are here for her.
I mean, I know I am. I can't speak for the rest, but
Oh, here comes Coda now.
I might have to buy one of those green screens that you attach to your chair.
Oh, do they
I love
have
that.
those? Those are cool.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Coda's face is blue. What's your
They don't
background? What's your background without the?
oh, Cody, you're muted.
I'm muted.
Yeah,
There we go.
you
It's-
might just have to. I think that's fine. Just actually, that works because you and Katie kind of have the same background, so that works.
Yeah, it must. I mean, but I've tried other places in my house, but it must hate this color.
Mine's kind of. If mine
The
didn't
walls
have
are very
a.
similar.
If mine didn't have the dry erase board behind me, I'd be kind of the same color too. Okay, any questions before we have about 3 minutes? Coda, if you can change your name to Facilitator Coda.
Did it not do that? I had it done, and then I guess when I
It
came on
reverts
here,
it back to, oh good, my cat's pooping and shifting her litter all over the place. This is the perfect time to be doing that. Awesome. Now she wants to go to the bathroom. So yeah, you gotta do it again when you come in here.
well, that's rude.
I'm telling you, she's conspiring against me. Dennis, are you putting on lipstick?
Chapstick. Like I said, you look good, you feel good.
Okay. I think I spelled facilitator right.
You're constantly rechecking just to make sure.
Okay, if everybody can make sure that they have their phone near them and set it to vibrate or silent, or just make sure you're checking it every now and then. That's how I will communicate with you. I am going to leave the chat up, but I have disabled private chat so that I don't want anybody like privately chatting any of the other participants. So I did that. So we will still communicate via your phone. Dennis, Coda, you kind of are used to me doing that, but so I'll try. I know I'm really bad. I'll be like, oh, good question. I get like really caught up in it, but I'll try to keep it to the important stuff. Okay. Any questions, anybody?
Well, I know you're gonna let everyone in at 5:30, but do you want me to wait a little bit after 5:30 to start, or do you?
Yes. We'll probably I will send a thumbs up emoji via the text messaging when we're ready.
Okay.
Okay. And we can you guys can either turn your cameras off for now while people are loading or stay on, whichever you want to do. I'm going to start letting people in as they sign in. And it looks like Jessica is our first person in, and we'll just wait for everybody else to join us. now. We'll be starting in just a minute. We're going to let other people get in. So FYI to everybody that's already here, my phone is just now saying 5:25, but my computer says 5:30. So I'm assuming I'm gonna go off my phone. So it's probably gonna be a while till we actually get to 5:30, just FYI. We're just waiting on a few more people. We'll be getting started in just a minute.
Okay, so it's 5:32. We'll go ahead and start. Welcome to College Culture Shock. I'm Katie Reynolds. I'm an instructional designer for MCC Online. And tonight we're going to explore what college is like for people around the world. And then we're going to engage in discussion on how college has shaped or influenced our personal identities. For the videos that we're going to watch, you can turn your video off, but during discussion, we ask that everyone turn their video on so we can have a more lively discussion and personable. But I will go ahead and turn it over to Crystal and she will introduce the rest of us.
Good evening. My name is Crystal Waters, and I serve MCC Online as the Student Services Manager. I am so happy to be attending this event this evening as a part of our Diversity EDU module learning. So I want to make sure that I am respectful of our time and introduce every single one of our facilitators and also acknowledge those working on the Diversity EDU team. This evening, we have Dennis, who is joining us. I'm sorry, let me go back. We have Miss Katie. I overlooked Katie. Katie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Katie, and like I said, I'm an instructional designer for MCC, the online campus, and I've been working to help Diversity EDU and kind of get it out there and be successful.
My name is Cynthia Heddleston, and I am the sociology instructor at Blue River, as well as teaching online. I'm also the co-creator of these equity and inclusion workshops. And so myself and another counselor that used to be at Blue River started those, and we have continued them through the years. So that's me. Welcome, everybody.
Hello, my name is Dennis Nash. I'm one of the facilitators for today. I've been a student at MCC Blue River for about 3-ish years now. I'm super excited to be a part of this, and I'm really glad that you guys are well been able to attend. So thank you so much for being here.
Hi guys, my name's Coda. I am a student right now at Blue River, and I'll be graduating this at the end of this semester, so that's super exciting. And I've been a facilitator helping Cynthia and partnering with Dennis on a couple other things. So this is just another fun activity I get to do, and I'm really excited for all the learning.
Perfect. Thank you for the introductions. Right now, I'm just going to give you a brief in-house rules for our online facilitation. And this is more so on the technology side. So if you are familiar with Zoom, welcome. We're going to be utilizing the chat feature quite often. So make sure that you are as we continue the conversation. If you'd like to add your thoughts there, please feel free to do that. As well as you see, we're all on a mute function. So you have a microphone. Those microphones are going to be muted throughout the presentations this evening, but we will ask that you engage. So make sure that you're able to move between flipping those on and off. As we move through more of the discussion this evening, you will see we will ask for the participation. We will ask for your thoughts and your ideas and your feedback. So I'm encouraged and excited to move forward with our presentation.
Okay, before we get started with the discussion and going over sort of what is culture and culture shock and all that stuff, something to spell. I do want to add a couple quick technical things that I just thought of before I let Dennis and Coda sort of talk about talk about the ground rules. And that's what I want to talk about is the ground rules today. Whenever we're having a discussion like this, we want to set some ground rules that we can all agree upon. So while Dennis and Coda go over those, be thinking about for yourself what kind of things you need from the group in order to feel like you can have a safe and open discussion. So Coda, I believe you're kicking us off on this.
Hi, guys. One of the big things about these discussions is we want to try to use our I voice. And in facilitation, we talk a lot about this with our discussions because we want to speak from our own experiences. It's important that we keep our thoughts unique to this discussion. And we try not to bring in, oh, my grandma's cousin, sister, or whatever. We keep it to ourselves.
Another thing that we ask is that we please show respect to one another. We're all here sharing stories and getting very personal with our lives. So we're asking, please show respect to one another and just be respectful.
Okay, and the last one I would like to add, and by the way, I am going to send these in the chat so that we can always reference back to them if we need to, is the idea of a safe space. We always hear that kind of being tossed around, and we might not really know what that means. By a safe space, we mean that you can share your stories, your experiences, your reflections, and have those accepted and have those appreciated and understood, not have them invalidated or used against you. And so that's what we mean by creating a safe space. So in order to do this, we ask that all of you be willing to listen to understand. And to listen to understand means that you are here to learn from one another. You're not listening to respond or to find holes in someone's story or to retaliate or anything like that. You're here so that you get a chance to learn from other experiences and to help connect to each other because of those experiences. And so in order to do that, we of course ask for confidentiality. I have students in here, you guys have classmates in here, you guys have instructors in here and coworkers. And whenever we have a safe space, we always honor confidentiality. What happens in Zoom stays in Zoom, okay? All right, so I'm gonna kick us off by talking a little bit about culture, right? So the topic of this discussion is college culture shock. And in order to have that discussion, we need to lay some definitions down in terms of what is culture shock, but also connect it to this larger idea of identities and what that means for us. Culture, as sociologists describe it, is a learned and shared way of being. Basically, we usually say it's the personality of a group. When a group comes together, they share an identity, they share material objects, they share language and beliefs and ideas. They share that identity together. They create their own dynamic, and that becomes a culture. So we are part of many, many different cultures, right? We can go from our immediate family to our extended family and change cultures. We can go from a peer group to a classroom and change cultures. We can go from classroom to classroom and change cultures. Our race is part of our culture just as much as our friend group, just as much as religion, just as much as family. We're all part of many, many cultures. And as my favorite sociologist pointed out, James Henseling, it's difficult to see culture because we take it for granted because it's everything we've already known. How do you ask a fish to describe water is how he describes culture. you can't, right? Because it's just everything the fish has known. And that's what culture is to us. It is all of the norms and values and behaviors and beliefs and ways of functioning in this world that seem normal to us. And until you take us out of the water and throw us on the beach, we probably won't pay attention to the water or know the water. And then once we're flopping around the beach, suddenly it becomes clear to us. And that is what we call culture shock. It is that jolt we experience when suddenly we're taken out of our water and we're in a totally different environment, or something has changed and we have to pay attention to this new culture and this new way of doing things. Sorry. Now, how does that tie to identities? Sociologists often point to the fact that our sense of self is socially learned. We know this because feral children tend to not have a sense of self. Feral children are children that are raised without human contact. So we tend to hypothesize and theorize that our sense of self is socially learned. And we learn it through the process of socialization from all the different cultures we are part of. So as I am part of my race culture, I acquire a sense of identity. Part of my religion, I acquire a sense of identity. Part of my social class, my family, so forth and so on, I acquire all these identities. And our sense of self is kind of like a sentence, right? And a sentence has nouns and adjectives and verbs and punctuation, and it all comes together to make this beautiful sentence. We're like that. We are made up of all these different identities that come together to make up our sense of self. And as we go through life and experience new cultures, our identity evolves too, our identity changes. And so one of the things about college is that tends to be such a huge culture shock, because it is the first time where you're really allowed to form your identity on your own. And you are not just allowed, you're almost required to do it. And you're sort of left in a kind of like the fish on the beach trying to find your way. Sorry, somebody's trying to get in, so I want to let them in. Okay, so today we're going to start off. We're going to have 3 different clips that take us in a certain direction. And the first clip is very broad, and it's going to focus on a girl's experience moving from a very nomadic type society in Iceland, very tribal in a sense, indigenous tribe in Iceland. And she's going to go from this tribe into France to study. And so before we start this first clip, I want you to take a minute to answer the poll. And Crystal's going to put a poll up for us real quick. Please let us know if you would ever consider studying in a different culture. I love it. Everybody's either yes or maybe, and I think that that is great. Nobody's like, absolutely not. And so we're going to watch this young woman's experience of going into a totally different culture. So I'm going to share my screen. Now, it's going to be kind of different because this documentary was not done by an American director or producer. So there's no a lot of audio. It's mostly just visual and seeing this tribe. So it's going to be 7 minutes of just taking in this girl's culture and then a little bit of interviews with her. And then I'm going to fast forward to when she actually leaves the island. And that's just a couple seconds. So we're going to watch about 7 minutes of what life is like for her. And just kind of put yourself in her shoes and think about what this would mean for you.
أداد أضمرت أنص عشو حقني آمين.
Hej. Så skal du til Frankrig
Ja,
og være uddannet
ja, som
kunstner.
ja. Det er der mange ting i.
Hvis der er god nogen.
Hvad?
Hvis du er god til det.
Ja, nu må jeg lige se. Ja.
Og det er to i.
I Rønne. I de to.
Hallo? Hallo? Den der, jeg tåler ikke ret meget muffin der, fordi jeg drikker ikke mere, og you know, så ja, okay, så det gør jeg. Jeg skal nok skrive, ja. Ja, så skal du have. I lige nøje. Ja, hej. Yeah. So this is not doctor. We have, you know, I will be in Denmark maybe 2 months. So I will have many nothings. You know, it's gonna be longer operation to my face. So I'm taking new face to me. So now I'm going to a non-alcoholic, you know. So if I take nothing, so not, so I can back to that life. So I will not take this life. I will be myself all my life. Just
to stand on your own feet again and not, yeah. So it's because I don't know anybody there, and I'm just moving from here, like moving from this place with 573 people to like 1 million people, and the cultural thing and so on is going to be, and of course, what I'm leaving behind.
Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed that video. But real fast, as you guys can see, she lives in like a very small town. Rough, I believe it's at 573 people. So moving to a place so big, such as France, what kind of culture shock do you guys think Nara ran into? What problems do you think she may have faced?
Possibly like loneliness.
Loneliness, well, yeah, that's definitely, I can totally understand her saying. Anyone else have a thought?
I think it might be like shocking, like traffic and stuff like that.
That is a good one. Traffic, that's one I didn't actually think about. That's a pretty good point. Anyone else have a thought?
I think there's going to be a big language barrier, or maybe not a barrier, but a shock.
Yeah, that would definitely certainly be one. I don't know how strong the barrier would be, but there would certainly be one. There would definitely be a complete difference in the way they use words and the tone and cadence of everything. Anyone else have a thought?
I know growing up in a not a smaller town as that, but a smaller town, and then moving to Kansas City for college, it was weird not to know anyone. And I'm sure that's how she felt. And it was loneliness, but it was even more than that, because you go from feeling like people know you and you know them to like knowing no one. So just a complete sense of connection, really, in many ways.
Almost like a sense of isolation or not
Yeah.
belonging.
Yeah,
I feel like it's almost worse.
Yeah.
I feel like it's almost worse when you're like sitting there seeing people all around you and then you don't know anybody. Like you're watching everybody interact, but you don't, I guess.
Oh, yeah, good point. I saw someone put in the chat, being away from friends and family. Yeah, that would certainly be a hard part, especially going from knowing, I'm sure knowing a town of 500, you know almost everybody in your immediate circle. So from going from knowing and seeing the people that you know every single day to knowing absolutely no one, that has to be a terrifying feeling. Does anybody else have a thought?
Yeah, actually the amount of people, I know that sounds really odd, like I moved here from Australia, and Sydney is very busy. There's a lot of people. Kansas City is not like that. So whenever I go back there, just literally you're bumping into people, there's people everywhere, and I would imagine that she would feel that same way.
Oh yeah, I would totally imagine she would be feeling that way. I saw someone else put in the chat, being scared of what will happen since you're on your own. Yeah, I'm sure there's probably a really strong sense of community where she's from. So going into a town, again, millions of people would definitely be a shocking thing. Does anyone else have another thought?
Yeah, I think you can go ahead. I've talked long.
Oh, I know whenever I went from Arkansas to California. So it was just a very big difference in, like, I had the Southern accent, people didn't talk the same way. And so I was the one that was center of attention, and I didn't like being the center of attention. but it was center of attention because I was different. And so she might not have that center of attention that she had. I mean, like she would be the center of attention because she's new versus being the person that's been there all the time and kind of blending in.
Yeah, being the center of attention, depending on how you react to that and whether she feels socially comfortable with that, would certainly be a challenge. And does anybody else have a thought?
So I think that she's probably gonna experience like much crime, and like that's probably gonna be like a first thing for her, because I can't imagine there being too much crime in a town that small, whereas like France is known for being filled with crime.
So I'm gonna piggyback off Bradley. I keep getting blown away by the fire truck and it being like just a little four-wheeler. So could you imagine the first time she even sees a fire truck? Like that's gonna completely just be such a culture shock to her. I'm sorry, Dan, I think you were gonna say something.
I was thinking about what Sarah said in the chat is when I lived in China, when I first got there, I didn't know how to do things like banking. How do I get money? How do I make phone calls? And all those things that you take for granted in your own culture, then you get somewhere else and you don't even know how to do the things you're used to doing.
But
yeah, going off what he was saying about like the crime and everything like that, I went to Mizzou straight out of high school, and it was crazy to me, like going from a town that's not very big to going to Columbia, because then like where I'm from, if you're walking around at night, you can walk anywhere you want and you don't have to sweat about it, like no one's gonna mess with you. But then when I was there, I'd just be like walking to my car at night and I was just uncomfortable.
it's certainly a hard thing to transition from an area that you know so well to something that's completely different. So someone else put in the chat, my friends had the same experience with exchanging money in China. Yeah, that's a one I wouldn't even know like the first place to begin on that personally, on how to do that. But does anyone else have any other thoughts before I pass on to the next question? All right, if not, Coda, would you like to go ahead and take the next question for me?
Of course. Thank you, Dennis, for starting us off really smooth. And thank you guys all for the continued conversation. I do just want to make sure and note if there's a possibility for you to turn your cameras on, I would love to see you guys' beautiful faces, and I'm sure everyone else would too. I'm going to go on into the next question. Okay, so would you be able to do what Nara did? She went through a lot, going from such a small town. We just talked about the challenges that she faced. Would you be able to do something similar to that? And then what challenges do you think you personally would have take from that?
I'll go first. I was lucky enough to have my family whenever I went out to California. I can't even imagine going from one state and leaving here and going someplace else without having at least a partner, a child, some support system and stuff with me at this point. We went from California back to Missouri, obviously, since we're here now. But I did it with a spouse and children and things. And so it wasn't like I had to start over by myself. I don't know that I could do it by myself.
I completely get where you're coming from. I'm moving in the fall, but I'm doing it with my partner. And so that makes it so much easier moving away from a family that I've lived with forever. So I think definitely that would affect me if I had to go somewhere where no one else that I knew was. Anyone else have any thoughts?
I like to think of myself as a fairly independent, adventurous person. But watching that and listening to this discussion, I'm realizing that I am independent and adventurous here in Kansas City and around the people I know and love and the support that I have. I would like to think that I could pick up and go do something like that, but I never have. And so, wow, the strength and courage and bravery that it takes for people to do things like that, that's amazing. So while I'd like to think I would, honestly, I would be scared to do that. Koda, what was the other part that you mentioned that you threw out there?
Yeah. Just what kind of struggles do you think that you personally would face if that you did leave that? And I think you've kind of answered some of those.
Yeah, well, I've traveled a little bit overseas, and it's really, really intimidating to be in a country where you don't know their language. And like Deanna and some other people were saying, I was in France a couple years ago and trying to figure out the money, and all of that was it was weird and a little bit scary. And I was there, on a trip and for fun and for 2 weeks. So anyway, that's a huge undertaking for people when people do that.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I haven't experienced anything quite like that yet. So I'm going to be very anxious and nervous, I feel like, when I do, even if it is just a small trip. Does anyone else have anything to say?
I was going to say I studied abroad in college, and I was in England, which they speak the same language. So you'd think it would be much easier, but it wasn't. And I remember I was traveling from England to Scotland, and one of my flights was canceled. And I ended up, actually, it was Belgium I was flying to Scotland, and the flight was canceled. And it ended up being that I had to navigate like train, plane, bus, and taxi all in one day. And it's still one of the proudest moments is getting through that experience. I do also think one of the biggest struggles is when you're going into an environment where you are unfamiliar, but others are familiar, sometimes the response that you get may not be as friendly, or it's people being not as receptive. And the experience that I'll give is I had a friend who went to France and did not speak the language at all, and struggled and had issues. Like, she went into a store, and one of the person who worked in the store was very upset that she wasn't even trying to speak the language. And at one point ended up kicking her out of the store. And she was very nice. She was never going to be, she was never rude or anything like that. So it's just one of those things that sometimes in those situations, it's a delicate balance, and it's tense, and you want to show respect to the culture that you're in. And at the same time, it's just complicated. So I think that would be a struggle. And those are just those daily interactions that you're facing, walking into a store to buy, she wanted a soda. So.
Thank you for sharing those stories. I think that we sometimes get perceived by people in other ways that we may not want to. We see that every day here, but I think when you go outside and you have these different barriers, anything from a language barrier to a not really sure where you're going, I think that you can kind of be perceived in a totally different way than you have never been before. Anyone else?
Yeah, I was just gonna go off what Sarah was saying, and just learning the norms of their society. It would probably be the biggest struggle. I know I was in Amsterdam for just a trip, and before we went, we wanted to rent bikes and go biking, but then when we got there, we quickly realized we would not know where to start. They bike more than they drive there. It's scarier to walk in the bike lane than it is in the middle of the street. And we were told that they learn the norms of biking when they're 5 years old. And I hadn't gone on a bike in 5 years. So I was like, there's no way I'm gonna do that. But just learning little things like that maybe your own society doesn't really do, I think would be a huge struggle.
Which is, I think, crazy, because that's something as simple as biking. Like what Sarah said, it's something as simple as buying a soda. And I think with a question with Dennis, what we said is that basically it sounds like all these struggles, it's like these small mundane things that we just can go and do really quickly. It becomes 10 times more difficult to do when we're in these other areas. I saw in the chat, Jessica said, I'm not sure I would even think to leave. Jessica, if you don't mind me asking, do you like, is there a reason why? Kind of just like, is it because of family or they're like, you know?
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, I'm not even sure if I was like that young woman that I would even think of leaving as a possibility. Like, I think I might be so just, I'm kind of a homebody. I'm sort of settled and like the comfort and so forth. And I think someone else said it earlier, which I thought was probably where I would say, which is that, you know, you think of yourself as like really independent and you're open-minded and you're willing to try new things, but that's in the context of the very comfortable, very secure life that I'm sitting in right now. And I just don't know if I was in that situation as that young woman, if I would have been so brave to even think about it in the first place. If I had even, you know, would have even seen that as a possibility for myself. Like, I'm just so, you know, just out, like, just so in awe of her bravery. Like, that's really brave in my opinion. So
I definitely agree. I think there's a lot of different factors that go into that, but I definitely agree with that. Real quick, any last thoughts?
I'm actually so my boyfriend's family came from Peru, so I'm actually having to learn another language because his mom doesn't speak English at all. So I'm having a language barrier there. So they so learning learning about their culture is and about why they came to here and stuff like that is just kind of interesting. um it's makes you think of what it's of hard times and stuff like that, and because they left because of it being so so they used to be in Lima, Peru. So it and it was so it was bad. And so when they came here, there with the language barrier and everything, they were just really confused. Everything was confusing. And now with me, it's I had my boyfriend has to translate everything to me with her. Um so yeah.
That's a very powerful thing. I think that in this, I think I also kind of came into this kind of just thinking of um, us being here at home and then leaving. So I think that gives it a different perspective of someone who hasn't lived there all their life and coming to America. So I really appreciate that kind of different and kind of new perspective that I don't know if I thought about. I think that obviously has its own challenges. Real quick though, I'm gonna wrap this up real quick. Thank you guys so much for all this content. This has been amazing conversation so far, but we are going to move on. So I'm gonna go pass that back on to Dennis.
Thank you once again, Coda. And real fast, just as Coda just said, I am really loving all the discussion and conversation. You guys are really open with your stories, and I really greatly appreciate that. But I'm gonna go ahead and get into my next question, and that is, what was it like for you when you came into college? What kind of culture shock did you experience, if you experienced any at all?
So I'm a non-traditional student, and I quit my job to come to school full time. So in a way, like being kind of older, I mean, there's a bunch of us, of course, there's lots of people like me. I'm not, alone in it. But being surrounded by such young little whippersnappers and, and being older has been very interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that is something that I've seen personally in my school. I've seen a lot of like older people come into my class, and they sometimes have like a harder time, either going back into classes or just being surrounded by a bunch of young people. It's certainly something that can be a little intimidating. You almost feel like you don't belong in a certain way, but that can be a hard thing to overcome. Does anybody else have another thought that they want to share?
Okay, so I took like a semester or a year off of college when I graduated because I graduated like a year early. And in that time, I moved to Colorado and kind of got into things that like weren't exactly good for my education, I guess. And coming back, I don't know, I just kind of came back to like a different environment than I had adapted to, and just seeing people, I don't know, I ran into issues with people, I guess, because in Colorado, people were very like nice, I guess, compared to Kansas City. And then in my hometown, everybody was pretty nice to me. But I don't know, when I came back, we were still face to face, and I just ran into a lot of issues, a lot of like arguments and escalations and things like that. So that was definitely like having to get back used to things here.
Yeah, that's one thing culture shock that I feel like a lot of people don't really pay enough attention to. It's not just leaving and going there, but perhaps leaving and coming back to the situation that you're so familiar with. Once you start to learn this whole other side of the world with a new way of life, it can kind of be weird to go back to what you once knew. Does anyone else have another experience that would like to talk about?
I want to share something about myself. I'm from China and I came here about 4 or 5 years ago. And so I came from a city that has 8 million people to Emporia in Kansas, which has 24,000 something people. So it was a big difference for me back then. But I got my master's degree here at Emporia, and I think that experience was very rewarding for me. I was able to meet a lot of people that from around the world because Emporia has this very fun big program that they have a lot of activities hosted in there, like conversation partner, and you have tea party, you have international food party, and like Chinese gala show every new year. So you have a lot of opportunity to meet with people and with people around the world, from friends from Korea, from China, from Indonesia, or from like a lot of country in the Europe too. So I think that experience gave me um, a lot of great, I think, just great experience to be around people and know people from all over the world. And that also put me into a position as an orientation leader. We also called it ambassador back then, to help other international students who are new to the culture to start in a new environment. So that was a very rewarding experience for me too. And I was able to use my experience to help people who are new in the country and experience what I did in the past. So
Let me just say that is absolutely wonderful that you've been able to take your experiences and help people apply it to their lives. That is absolutely amazing. Did anyone else have another story that they would like to tell? I'm really loving this conversation so far. You guys are doing amazing. Thank you so much for sharing.
I think the biggest thing for me when I entered college was all the autonomy that I gained. I think when you're in high school, your life is not completely, but it is very planned out for you. And you go to school during these hours, Monday through Friday. You get to pick your courses a little bit, but mostly they are mapped out for you. And I know even my first year, I kind of just made my schedule just how it would be in high school. I went to college every day from 8 a.m. to around 2. And I didn't really stray from that just because that was what was comfortable to me. But then you realize, and I feel like I learned so much more in college when I started being able to take courses that I was actually interested in more than just what's dictated, from K through 12. So I think the autonomy part of college was pretty shocking initially.
Thank you so much for sharing, Katie. Real fast, I'm gonna go ahead and move on and pass over to Cynthia. Real fast, we will have more time to share more stories throughout the night, but I just kind of want to keep a good pace going. So again, we will have more opportunities to share. But without further ado, Cynthia, would you mind taking over for me?
Thank you. Sorry, I lost my voice right then. So I think probably one area where we can all agree that college culture shock has hit us is with COVID. Things have definitely changed for us. And they haven't just changed for us, but they've changed around the world. So Crystal's going to go on and put up a poll real quick that just kind of gauges, since COVID virtual learning started, have you experienced technical difficulties with computers, mics, webcams, whatever, that have interfered with you actually being able to attend classroom learning? So it seems like the majority of us have, with almost 70% having interfere with our learning in some way. So we're going to show a slightly different college experience coming up. This is a person in Pakistan who had to change a lot about going to college when it comes to COVID.
بیا په نن سبا دور کې چې کم کووډ 19 د وجنه دنیا کې لاک ډاون لګیدل اسپیشلی د پاکستان کې هم دغه وجنه لاک ډاون د څومره یونیورسيټیز دي څومره کالجز دي هغه ټول بند شوي دي نو هغه د وجنه چې کم انلاین کلاسز حکومت دغه کړي ډېر خپل اقدامي کړه بالکل موږ دغه اقدام ستایو ځکه چې حکومت دا ثابت کړه چې هر څومره بره حالات په ملک کې نو ان شاء الله موږ د تعلیم چې کم هغه تسلسل دغه جاری ساتو خو چون کې کوکته شي د موږ نوې چې کم قبایلی ځای لري په هغه کې انټرنیټ کار نه کوي زه دلته چې راځم د خاص کار د انټرنیټ لپاره راځم چې یو خو د ما چې کم سبجیکټ دی پولیټیکل ساينس دا څه ضروري دی چې څومره کلاسز دي یا څومره د موږ د پولیټیکل ساينس تھینکرز دي د هغوی چې څومره ایډیالوژي د هغوی چې څومره تھیسیس دي هغه موږ ته ملو شي د انټرنیټ په ذریعہ باندې ځکه چې په دا کې د فرانس د جاپان د دنیا چې څومره تھینکرز دي د هغوی پکې چې کم تھیسیس دي هغه هم موږ ته دلته نشي ملوي نو هغه لپاره موږ کوشش کوو چې داسې ځای ته لاړ شو چې هغه ته انټرنیټ اویلیبل وي اسپیشلی اوس لګیام په برټش یو کې کانسټیټیوشن باندې فرانس کانسټیټیوشن باندې او دین علاوه چې کم یو اس کانسټیټیوشن باندې هغه باندې زه اوس لګیام پریزنټلی هغه کلاسونه ما نیم راواخستل ډاونلوډ میکړ ټولو نه مین خبره چې کم د ما د پولیټیکل ساينس ډپارټمنټ سره هغه چې کم کرنٹ افیرز دي موجوده په دنیا کې سره روان دي دغه مطابق نه چې ځان خبر شم دا چې کم حالات دي دغه نه خبر شم
A constitution for the Second Republic was now drafted by the National Assembly.
نو د مونږ چې څومره د فاټه سټوډنټس دي هغه خو چې کوم دي چې کوم ایکس فاټه وه د هغې چې څومره سټوډنټس دي د ټولو نه اول خو هغوی سره اوس په احتجاج باندې هم دي ځکه چې هغوی چې مونږ ته آنلاین کلاسز چې کوم دي هغه نه منظور دي وجه دا وه چې مطلب دلته انټرنیټ نشته دلته صرف دا بعضې ایریې چې کوم دا مونږ زه دا وخت ناست یم یو دوه درې ایریې داسې نورې دي چې په هغې کې انټرنیټ کار کوي بقایا په یوه ایریا کې هم انټرنیټ کار نه کوي او دومره لرې ایریا فار ایگزامپل د مونږ نه داسې ایریا هم شته په دغو علاقو کې چې هغه د مونږ نه په 25-30 کیلومتر 40 کیلومتر کې لرې خلک پراته دي نو هغه خو دغه ځای له نشي راتلی انټرنیټ له هغه وې څه کوي بیا بل دا وي چې مونږ نه په نیمه کې هم آنلاین کلاسز چې کوم هغه د مونږ نه په نیمه کې هم پاتې شي د هغې د پاتې کېدو وجه دا وي چې مطلب د مونږ سره انټرنیټ چې کوم هغه داسې شان د سټرانګ نه وي کوم چې په کار دی ځکه چې ما تاسو ته خبر وکړه چې دا د مونږ نه تقریبا 20-25 کیلومتر لرې ایریا چې کوم سیګنلز دي هغه مونږ رانسو نو د مونږ چې کوم دي دا مسلې ګورنمنټ له پکار دي چې د دغه مسلو بالکل هغه چې کوم دي خپل پالیسیز جوړې کړي
All right, guys. I think that's a lot to take in. So if you guys just need a second to kind of think about this, but the next question is, what is your reaction to this video? So I'm gonna give you guys a second whenever you're ready.
This is really humbling. The other day on Monday, I was having trouble, and Cynthia would know this, with Google. They were doing some work in our neighborhood, and I lost my internet, and oh my God, it's the end of the world. What will I do? And then to see that and the lengths that he's going to for his education is, yeah, it's really humbling.
I completely agree with you there. It's like I feel almost bad about complaining about the little issues that I'll have or whatever. Like with the lighting just now, it kind of like, because as the sun's going down, my lighting's bad, and so I have to adjust. Anyone else?
I see some parallels into the students' experience in Pakistan and the students' experiences here at MCC when we too transitioned to forced virtual learning. While those students in Pakistan had to climb a mountain, many of our students didn't even have that option, let alone 25 kilometers to reach because of not having good internet, period, or not even having a device to put the internet in. So the challenge is just, it shows up differently depending on what culture and what geographical location you have, but the frustration is still shared among students who just don't have access.
I think that's a brilliant point to bring up. I think there was a lot of districts that struggled getting devices to a lot of kids, especially in certain areas where maybe funding wasn't as amazing. And so I definitely think that you can find parallels within other places, even if it's not the same. We might not have had to climb a mountain like you said, but we had to climb a metaphorical mountain, if you will. Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, kind of going off of that is like, it's kind of humbling. It makes me kind of feel bad because when classes went online, I was like, man, am I even gonna like go this semester, you know, because I live out in the middle of nowhere. And so I was like, okay, I'd have to drive 15-20 minutes to class every day, and like, or to go to the library, and that's just like not something I want to do. But I ended up buying like a hotspot thing and paying for internet, which has been several $100s, but like I'm not having to hike up a mountain every day. So like, I don't know, kind of humbling.
I think it also just shows the lengths that we will go to make sure we can get our education. I think that's kind of also the point that we can see there. That's similar as the lengths we will go to. And I think that's what that reminds me of, is the lengths that we will go to. And like, we do know that while we hate waking up every day for college or school or whatever, we know that it's important. I think we have that picture of the goal in mind.
I was struck by the fact that all the people that were showed there, I know there were only 6, but they were all men. I don't know if that was it brought to mind whether it would have more, women might have more difficulty accessing even walking up to the mountain and that kind of thing within their culture. And thinking about other constrictions beyond just geographic location that might impact somebody's ability to get that, even just the internet connection.
I definitely think that's a good point to bring up, just because I know that have been several stories where the females have not been allowed, and not just in Middle Eastern countries. America, when we were younger, women were told to stay home and, cook and everything like that. So I think that's a really good point to bring up, that there are some countries that might still struggle with that. But they also might not just have shown that the women, but yeah, I get where you're coming from.
In addition to that, then women might not be able to actually go with men. So it could have been just that they weren't able to actually be there at the same time as a man because they're not allowed to be around them without parental supervision and that type of thing too.
I agree. I think there's a lot of different factors that kind of go into that. I think it'd be interesting to learn more about their situation and everything, and kind of see if it really is just the women that aren't allowed, or if they're just not allowed to go at the same time, like you're saying, Sharon. Anyone have any last thoughts? Okay. Well, I think we can all agree that the video was very shocking and very humbling and everything. And I thank you guys all for your responses. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Dennis to continue this.
You once again, Coda. Okay, so my next question for you guys is, what educational obstacles have you faced since COVID, and what have been the consequences, either positive or negative, that they've had on your life?
I'll start.
Oh, go right ahead.
So I had COVID last October. And I was actually hoping this question would come up. So I am actually still dealing with this issue. So I had a teacher last semester who was absolutely rude. And from the beginning. And then I had COVID in October, and I missed 3 weeks of class. And I'm the type of person who doesn't give up. And so she basically was not giving me accommodations, and then we had a miscommunication, and then basically we had a she basically told so an assignment said I was supposed to post an assignment on Google Docs, and then we had a communication, and she said post it on Pinterest. So I posted it on Pinterest instead of Google Docs. And then comes grading time, and she said it was missing. And so I talked to her and showed her the emails, and she didn't even give me partial credit. So that's the issue I've had since COVID.
Yikes. Let me just say, I'm so sorry that happened to you, and I'm also sorry you had to deal with COVID. I'm hoping that you've made a recovery since then, and that...
Nope, I'm still having issues. I actually have asthma. And so I'm having to go to continuously doctor appointments. I'm actually seeing a cardiologist because they're thinking I have issues with my heart now because of COVID. So yeah.
I once again, I am so sorry, and I pray that everything gets better for you.
And the teacher basically failed me because of that. I'm only missing five points because of she won't give me partial credit for the assignment I did.
Jeez, that is terrible.
Yep.
Does anyone else have another story that they would like to share?
Yeah. So, I think COVID has definitely impacted a lot of people, in a lot of negative ways, of course. For me, I see it as a very negative thing, of course, but it impacted me personally in a positive way because I see school as a different thing now. Instead of getting up and staying in this routine and going to school, I see it as a different opportunity. And because of what has gone down, and I think I've seen what I'm able to do and what I'm best at learning at. So I think it's helped me in that aspect, and it's helped my lifestyle a lot more. But it kind of sucks saying that because it seems like everybody else is kind of struggling and everything like that, and I want to be there for people. And I completely understand, it's a rough time. So yeah, for sure. But it's impacted me more positively than it has negatively. Very thankful for that, of course. But yeah.
Real fast, I think you made a good point. I think one of those things, I wouldn't say you should necessarily feel bad about finding a positive. This is such a difficult time that we've never seen anything like in our lifetime. So I think the fact that you're able to find a positive is something that's really motivational and really inspirational. So I would just say great job on that. Real fast, Maggie said in the chat, I'm lucky. My teacher is really used to online teaching, so as Blackboard is organized, and I do miss my classmates. Feedback while we were working on projects in class. Since I'm a graphic design student, of course, my classmates chime in on Zoom, but it's not as much feedback as I would like to have as in person. I like to toss around creative ideas with people. That is one thing that has certainly been harder moving to online is lines of communication have gotten a little bit harder. We can't exactly go and tell our professor or our classmates exactly what we want. We have to wait to send the email, wait for them to reply, and it kind of slows down things a lot. So it's certainly something that would make things a lot more difficult. Does anyone else have a thought they'd like to share?
I just want to say real quick, I think that there's definitely pros and cons to this. I think there's that finding a positive part. I've had to work a lot more this semester. And I was really worried that class would interfere with that if it was in person. But with it being online, I kind of set up my Zoom on my phone and I'll decorate cakes because I work at a place where I decorate cakes. So I'll decorate cakes and I'll be able to like have class while I also like do my job. So in that part, it's nice. But then it's like, I also know that it's been such a different thing for teachers. And I think that I always loved teachers, but I think I have seen how much more work that they have to kind of put in. I guess they've always put in a lot of work, but I think the transition I've like been able to, I guess, like see and hear their stories, like these teacher stories. And I think that's like kind of shed like a positive light. Like when I'm waiting for an email, I'm like, well, they also have like probably 55 other emails that they've got to get with other people having the same technical issues or whatever. So I think it's kind of humbled me in that sense.
Thank you for sharing, Coda. So I'm going to go ahead and ask for one more before I go ahead and wrap up this question and pass it on to Cynthia. Does anyone else have another story they would like to share?
I was just gonna say that like with COVID and us doing all online classes, I have ADD, so it's like already hard for me to focus. But whenever I'm just sitting at home and like stuff's going on around me and the dogs and cats are all running around and doing stuff, it makes it so much harder to focus on class.
I certainly can agree with that. Like, I can normally focus on something, but as soon as my phone dings, it completely just goes out of my head. But Cynthia, would you like to go ahead and take this over for me?
Yes, thank you, Dennis. And I have to echo exactly what you just said, Arthur. Like, any of my students in here, they know how bad my dogs are. So, so today we're going to wrap up with this last clip, and this is going to be where the majority of the discussion happens. And it's going to seem like a big shift because we're going to move into a video that talks about the danger of a single story. What happens when we become defined and seen as only one part of our identity. And it's going to seem like a shift, but don't worry, Dennis and Coda will guide you to where we're going to take you with that discussion. But I just want you to kind of watch this and process this and kind of make your own connections. We won't unfortunately get to watch the whole video. It's very powerful, but you can always Google it and watch it later if you like.
I'm a storyteller, and I would like to tell you a few personal stories about what I like to call the danger of the single story. I grew up on a university campus in eastern Nigeria. My mother says that I started reading at the age of 2, although I think 4 is probably close to the truth. So I was an early reader, and what I read were British and American children's books. I was also an early writer. And when I began to write at about the age of 7, stories in pencil with crayon illustrations that my poor mother was obligated to read, I wrote exactly the kinds of stories I was reading. All my characters were white and blue-eyed. They played in the snow. They ate apples. And they talked a lot about the weather, how lovely it was that the sun had come out. Now, this despite the fact that I lived in Nigeria. I had never been outside Nigeria. We didn't have snow. We ate mangoes. And we never talked about the weather because there was no need to. My characters also drank a lot of ginger beer because the characters in the British books I read drank ginger beer. Never mind that I had no idea what ginger beer was. And for many years afterwards, I would have a desperate desire to taste ginger beer. But that is another story. What this demonstrates, I think, is how impressionable and vulnerable we are in the face of a story, particularly as children. Because all I had read were books in which characters were foreign, I had become convinced that books, by their very nature, had to have foreigners in them and had to be about things with which I could not personally identify. Now, things changed when I discovered African books. There weren't many of them available, and they weren't quite as easy to find as the foreign books, but because of writers like Chinua Achebe and Kamara Laye, I went through a mental shift in my perception of literature. I realized that people like me, girls with skin the color of chocolate, whose kinky hair could not form ponytails, could also exist in literature. I started to write about things I recognized. Now, I loved those American and British books I read. They stirred my imagination. They opened up new worlds for me. But the unintended consequence was that I did not know that people like me could exist in literature. So what the discovery of African writers did for me was this. It saved me from having a single story of what books are. I come from a conventional middle-class Nigerian family. My father was a professor. My mother was an administrator. And so we had, as was the norm, live-in domestic help who would often come from nearby rural villages. So the year I turned 8, we got a new houseboy. His name was Fide. The only thing my mother told us about him was that his family was very poor. My mother sent yams and rice and our old clothes to his family. And when I didn't finish my dinner, my mother would say, "Finish your food. Don't you know people like Fide's family have nothing?" So I felt enormous pity for Fide's family. Then one Saturday, we went to his village to visit. And his mother showed us a beautifully patterned basket made of dyed raffia that his brother had made. I was startled. It had not occurred to me that anybody in his family could actually make something. All I had heard about them was how poor they were, so that it had become impossible for me to see them as anything else but poor. Their poverty was my single story of them. Years later, I thought about this when I left Nigeria to go to university in the United States. I was 19. My American roommate was shocked by me. She asked where I had learned to speak English so well and was confused when I said that Nigeria happened to have English as its official language. She asked if she could listen to what she called my tribal music and was consequently very disappointed when I produced my tape of Mariah Carey. She assumed that I did not know how to use a stove. What struck me was this: she had felt sorry for me even before she saw me. Her default position toward me as an African was a kind of patronizing, well-meaning pity. My roommate had a single story of Africa, a single story of catastrophe. In this single story, there was no possibility of Africans being similar to her in any way, no possibility of feelings more complex than pity, no possibility of a connection as human equals. I must say that before I went to the US, I didn't consciously identify as African. But in the US, whenever Africa came up, people turned to me, never mind that I knew nothing about places like Namibia. But I did come to embrace this new identity, and in many ways, I think of myself now as African, although I still get quite irritable when Africa is referred to as a country, the most recent example being my otherwise wonderful flight from Lagos 2 days ago, in which there was an announcement on the Virgin flight about their charity walk in India, Africa, and other countries. So after I had spent some years in the US as an African, I began to understand my roommate's response to me. If I had not grown up in Nigeria, and if all I knew about Africa were from popular images, I too would think that Africa was a place of beautiful landscapes, beautiful animals, and incomprehensible people fighting senseless wars, dying of poverty and AIDS, unable to speak for themselves, and waiting to be saved by a kind white foreigner. I would see Africans in the same way that I, as a child, had seen Fide's family. This single story of Africa ultimately comes, I think, from Western literature. Now, here's a quote from the writing of a London merchant called John Locke, who sailed to West Africa in 1561 and kept a fascinating account of his voyage. After referring to the Black Africans as beasts who have no houses, he writes, "They are also people without heads, having their mouths and eyes in their breasts." Now, I've laughed every time I've read this, and one must admire the imagination of John Locke. But what is important about his writing is that it represents the beginning of a tradition of telling African stories in the West, a tradition of sub-Saharan Africa as a place of negatives, of difference, of darkness, of people who, in the words of the wonderful poet Rudyard Kipling, are half devil, half child. And so I began to realize that my American roommate must have, throughout her life, seen and heard different versions of this single story. As had a professor who once told me that my novel was not authentically African. Now, I was quite willing to contend that there were a number of things wrong with the novel, that it had failed in a number of places, but I had not quite imagined that it had failed at achieving something called African authenticity. In fact, I did not know what African authenticity was. The professor told me that my characters were too much like him, an educated and middle-class man. My characters drove cars. They were not starving. Therefore, they were not authentically African. But I must quickly add that I, too, am just as guilty on the question of the single story. A few years ago, I visited Mexico from the US. The political climate in the US at the time was tense, and there were debates going on about immigration. And, as often happens in America, immigration became synonymous with Mexicans. There were endless stories of Mexicans as people who were fleecing the healthcare system, sneaking across the border, being arrested at the border, that sort of thing. I remember walking around on my first day in Guadalajara, watching the people going to work, rolling up tortillas in the marketplace, smoking, laughing. I remember first feeling slight surprise, and then I was overwhelmed with shame. I realized that I had been so immersed in the media coverage of Mexicans that they had become one thing in my mind, the abject immigrant. I had bought into the single story of Mexicans, and I could not have been more ashamed of myself. So that is how to create a single story. Show a people as one thing, as only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they become.
Okay, so as you guys can see, that is a very powerful video. And so I'm gonna go ahead and ask my next question. And I want you guys, after I ask it, I want you guys to really sit back and maybe take a moment before you answer it. Really let this question marinate in your head. So the question is, describe a single story you think has been assigned to you based off of your identity.
I can share an anecdote from my graduate work. I was a physics graduate student. I had an instructor that asked questions about, very difficult physics questions to people. And whenever he would ask me questions, it was about spelling. How do you spell this, Deanna? Because I was a woman, and a woman physicist didn't count for anything. So he would always ask me spelling questions. I'll never forget it.
Wow, I'm actually at a loss for words for that one. That one's actually insane to me. Does anyone else have a story they would like to share?
I can share. So this was something that happened a few times. I think the first time that it happened, it didn't dawn on me what had just happened. But I was working, and I'm not gonna say where, but I was doing my job, and two people, and they were upper level individuals. They came to me and they asked me, do you have your papers? And so I'm going to say I'm Mexican, and I'm a naturalized citizen. But they asked me if I had my papers, and if I had gone through HR, through like all the proper channels. And it didn't hit me. I wasn't like shocked or anything, but so I answered the question. And then my supervisor found out later what they had done. So my supervisor was upset and ended up talking to them about it. But then years later, it happened again, and it happened somewhere else. And but if they didn't ask me directly, it was mostly they asked my supervisor. I think it was when DACA hit, and I think there was like issues with DACA, and so they asked my supervisor, "Is Jessica going to be okay?" And so my supervisor, kind of like put that person on check, like, what makes you think that, Jessica won't be okay? And they're like, well, because, with what's happening with DACA, like, is she going to be fine? Is she going to keep her job? So it's just that thing, like, just because you're Mexican, you're probably like not here, quote unquote, legally, or you're a DACA recipient, or but yeah, it was just two events that happened.
That is absolutely terrible. I am so sorry that not only happened to you, but happened to you twice. That people have made these assumptions about you purely based off of your ethnicity. That is absolutely terrible. Real fast, Cynthia, I was like watching your face and it looked like you were gathering a lot there just off of reading your face. But did you have a thought that you wanted to share?
Just when I was watching the video or just now?
Just now to what Jessica was saying.
Oh, no, I am managing the questions and everything for the facility right now. So I'm just
okay. I just saw your face had a lot of movement. So
I'm
I
30
was
minutes ahead of you.
Oh, okay, sorry. But real fast, Daisha put in the chat. My response is ignorance or inferior. Your questions regarding the common single story assigned to you is one of many identities in many spaces. That is one I can totally understand, is almost being assigned as if you're lesser or inferior in a certain way. That is one that can truly be damaging to an individual. Does anyone else have a thought that they'd like to share?
Mine's not nearly like Jessica's. But going from, if you have the idea in your head of what Arkansas is, and Missouri is a little bit different whenever how they feel about Arkansas, but you go out to California and I was asked, did I have paved roads? Did I have indoor plumbing? Did I have, how high does education go there? I moved when I was a junior in high school. So obviously it went through high school, but you have the persona of being that hillbilly hick that doesn't have any, in the outhouse, and that doesn't have, enough rooms in your house, and how could you afford to move to California? And there was just all these things. And then I had the reverse whenever I would come back to visit to Arkansas, because in California, all you think of is the beaches. And so it was, how close are you to the beach? And are there a bunch of blonde people out there? And do you feel out of place? And, all of that and stuff. And so I think every person has that image and stuff of what different states are like, even not even just different countries. And then people kind of inflict that persona and stuff on people and stuff as moving from one state to another.
Thank you for sharing. Real fast, Arthur, that looks like you were about to say something. Would you like to share?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I have a buddy who I've known for years, like since I was like 15 or so, and he's African American. And the first time that we worked at an auto auction together last year, and he was gonna come by my house with me after work, and he was asking me when we were coming down my road, he was like, "Hey, Art, so your family like lives in the country, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Would you say your family's country?" And I said, "I guess so." And he said, "They're not gonna like be pissed at you for bringing me around or anything, or like nothing's gonna happen to like you or me going out there, right?" And like I got where he was coming from, but I felt so bad that he even had to ask me that question, because like no one in my family has a racist bone in their body. Like nothing's gonna happen to him out here or anything like that. But just because of how everything is around us, he had to be worried about that. And then when I told my family that, they all felt really bad that he had to ask that too.
Yeah, that's a really sad reality. Like I can speak from a personal experience, me being African American. There is like almost a kind of keep a third eye in the back of your head, kind of always be aware of your surroundings. I completely understand where your friend was coming from in that scenario, and also how you might have felt knowing that how your family is, and that you guys have no biases or anything against African Americans. Does anybody else have a thought that they'd like to share?
I have one now. I'm sorry, go ahead. You go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cynthia. You go ahead.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to say, so from my experience working with international people and international students, I have a lot of those stories. But there were two stories I want to share. One is on myself, one is on my friend. So he is living in Arkansas also, and he is an instructional designer. He's a senior instructional designer, and he did a lot of training. He worked in the US for 8 years, and there were one time he was speeding, and then he got a ticket. So he was, when he was paying for a ticket, I think he was in the police office. And so I don't know the detail of that story, but he told me when the police saw him the first time without even he start to speak, he said, he told the person next to him, he said, he needs an interpreter. And just because he is Asian, just because he looks Asian, and they said they think he needs an interpreter. And he was really mad about this when he told me. He said, I was doing this training for 8 years for people, speaking English for many years, and just they look at me and see I am Asian, and they like treating me very bad, and then just being rude and thinking I just don't know how to speak English. And there's another story that was happened on myself is with all the thing that with COVID happened, with a lot of people, news come out with Asian being in this crisis. And then so last year in March, I was in Dallas, and I was the only one person that was wearing mask, that was walking the street, because at that time no one was believing in wearing mask, and people think a mask is not a big deal. But I was the only person that wearing it, and people look at me all weird, and just because I am an Asian with a mask on. So those two things, I was very mad, and yeah, I could relate to to the story.
Let me just say again, my deepest apologies to your friend. That is an absolutely terrible thing to have happen to them. But really fast, I'd say thank you guys so much for sharing on that question. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it to Coda. Would you like to go ahead and take the next question for me?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dennis. And thank you everyone for this conversation. I loved how it kind of all just flows together. Speaking of flowing, we're going to flow into the next question. So as we can see, the single story often creates or often limits what the world knows about us. How would you say that the single story has limited you?
So I'll kick us off by saying what I was going to say in the last question and kind of connecting it to this question. I think my single story, this question is really hard for me as a white, blonde hair, blue-eyed woman now in the upper class. I think that I have many privileges. So I think a lot of times one of my privileges is that I don't get assigned a single story. But as a woman, in a place of work, sometimes I do get assigned that single story as being, it's not directly seen and not heard, but it's sometimes it feels like you kind of are getting like a little pat on the head and being like, good job, go sit down kind of thing. And I didn't notice that, and this is kind of a weird way to answer this question. I didn't notice that until I have the new president of my campus is amazing and has really given me a voice that I never realized I had before. So much to the point that when he calls on me to get my opinions of stuff, I do very much feel shaky and nervous and unsure because I just realized how much I haven't had that voice before. And so I think the danger of my single story or the limitations has been, and it's very much reminded me, I very much felt this when I watched the Meghan Markle interview, is I do think at times I'm silenced as a woman, and in very subtle, very, very, very subtle ways. And having an advocate there that is helping me find my voice has been huge. But I think that as a woman, sometimes we get assigned a single story too, and that can mean being silenced, or our voice isn't as important as others. So that's kind of my thoughts on that.
I feel like that's a big thing. I know for me, my single story kind of goes along with that. It limits what I feel like I might be able to do. growing up poor and being kind of labeled as white trash sometimes. I think that that kind of gave me that limitation that maybe I was never going to be able to accomplish college. And it really, I think, if it weren't for other people kind of being like, no, that's not how that works, that I think that like that I'm worried, I guess, that if no one had kind of stepped in and said that, that I would have never maybe done more, gone to college. I wanted to read Daisha's post that he made in the chat. My single story gives people permission to exclude me from spaces that I would be an excellent asset to. I agree. Been there, felt that. When I'm labeled as inferior, ignorant, people feel justified to exclude me or ignore my existence. I know that if there were more time spent in getting to know me, many would see how much I can offer. So you have to find creative ways to pass the single story labels. It's hard, but it's worth it. I think that's such a great point, Daisha, and I really appreciate you for sharing that. I know sharing these single stories can be really vulnerable, and it's kind of a lot to share, like a side of your very like vulnerable side of yourself. So I appreciate that. I feel like a lot of times we're stereotyped, and when our single story is shared, that other people limit us, but we can also limit ourselves. And so I think that's a really big thing. And I think finding the ways to work around that, whether that's you knowing that it's going to be worth it in the end, or me having people come up to me and convincing me to go to college no matter what my background is. I think that's a really crazy thing I also think of, how we have break down those barriers of the single story. Anyone else have anything to share?
So I when I was little, I had some so I'm adopted. So my bio parents weren't so nice to me when I was an infant. So I had some brain issues, traumatic brain I have a traumatic brain issue, so I have disabilities, and so I struggle with learning and just having the difficulties of trying to sometimes trying to talk to people, or get my words out, or sometimes I get really frustrated easily, and so I don't what's the word? I struggle with figuring out what to do, and so with this new degree that I'm going for, I feel like it's more my passion, because I'm really good with computers. I'm going for graphic design, and so I'm really good with computers, and so I'm really autistic and really good with computers, and I just feel like with me having all this issues and stuff, I just feel like I just feel so motivated and stuff. Yeah.
I really appreciate for you being super vulnerable with us and telling us a little bit of yourself. I think that when we see that, I think sometimes we can almost limit ourselves, and we kind of force ourselves into a single story based on maybe assumptions people have said to us or things we've just heard around the world or whatever, that we kind of just fit ourselves in this box. And I think that finding these passions, finding these things, I think those are definitely, like your computer, for example. I think that's a way maybe you can help break down those barriers of a single story that live inside your head. Again, thank you so much for sharing. Does anyone else have anything to say?
I was gonna say, when I first got out of college, my undergrad is in secondary education in social studies. So I was applying, I was in an interview for a high school history position, and the principal told me that they had just lost 2 football coaches, and that basically in short terms I wasn't going to get the job because history is usually filled by male high school football coaches, which was really discouraging at the time. And I actually took a break from, I didn't know if I even wanted to do that anymore. So I just feel like the effect on a single story can really damage kind of your goals.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I would definitely feel the same way. I feel like, especially with the history teachers or whatever, I feel like that's definitely a big thing. My partner, she's actually going into social studies and history and everything, because she knows it is a very male dominated kind of thing, especially in high schools, which is where she wants to teach. So I'm sure she can feel that with you. I've said this multiple times in our training sessions, but I wish she was here, could be here with us. I think she would be really fit really well into this conversation. But I definitely think that while like we can find those barriers to break things down, the single story, I think it's hard to do that. And I think it's okay to take some time to kind of, like, I think it's natural to take that time to feel discouraged and everything. But eventually we're always gonna like get back up and be like, no, my single story is my story is not gonna be determined by one person or a single thing. I appreciate you for sharing that, though. Thank you, Katie. And then I'm going to toss it back on to Dennis. I appreciate you guys all for sharing all your struggles and all the difficulties. And I wish you guys all luck in breaking down that barrier, and I guess just encouraging you guys to see these things as steps in to make tomorrow like a better place for everyone. But again, I'm going to pass it on to Dennis.
Thank you once again, Coda. So with my next question, how do you guys think the college experience impacts, changes, or reinforces the single story?
Well, I think it definitely diminishes it. I think meeting people from all these different backgrounds, such as events like this, I mean, it just opens the eyes to everyone. Just like, that's just not true. There's not a whole group of people that's just alike. We all have different backgrounds. It's just, and you kind of meet new people from all sorts of different backgrounds and you realize that. So I think college pretty much demolishes that for people who interact.
Thank you for sharing. That's something I would certainly agree with when I started college. Is I started off being homeschooled, so most of my social interaction came from like family and a small group of friends. Once I came to college and I started to see a whole bunch of different people that looked like me, didn't look like me, and I saw the things we did have in common, the things we didn't have in common, and just seeing how the world really blended together for me was really something special. Does anyone else have a thought that they'd like to share?
I think for me, it broke my the stereotype I had, and it also broke my bias towards other things, and I saw a lot of different possibilities out there from people from different area, from different countries, from different side of the world, And I think that definitely helped me to open my heart and accept a lot of different things, and helped me realize there's no right or wrong. There's only different, like different is different. There's really no right or wrong way to do things. And that's what I got out of my study here and both in my hometown.
Thank you for sharing. Real fast, Sharon, looked like you had an idea that you wanted to share.
I was going to piggyback on what Bradley had said about if you actually get involved. So I think it can be, the online student who decides that they're just going to be an online student who really doesn't associate with too many other people. Yes, they're going to learn a little bit through discussion posts and things like that. But I think it's really when you actually do try to get involved and you try to get connected to different student groups, or you try to get actually involved with the actual college itself, that you're going to learn the most and that you're going to expand your horizons. And it's not just going to be this, it's like it's always been, but you're able to actually open up and see that there are other people out there that are different than you and that everybody can still get along.
For sharing. College certainly does expand your horizons and opens up your entire view of the world. I would certainly agree with that. Does anyone else have a comment they'd like to share? All right, if not, I think I'm gonna go ahead and pass it over to Coda. Would you like to go ahead and take the last question for us?
Of course, thank you so much. So before I kind of ask my final question, I kind of want to just leave you guys with this thought that that I really appreciate you guys for coming here. And I think part of the equity inclusion workshop is to continue to learn and continue to expand our horizons and to continue to make mistakes, but also learn from those mistakes. And I think that's what can happen whether you're going across the country or you're climbing mountains to find cell service or you're joining new clubs and trying to get included in college. I think there's so many different ways we can break down these stereotypes that we have of ourselves and of other countries. And I really appreciate you guys for being with me, with Dennis, with Crystal, with Cynthia, and with Katie along this journey. And I thank you guys, Dennis, Katie, Cynthia, and Crystal, for allowing me to learn and allowing me to come in on this opportunity. It's been amazing. And I'm gonna really hope that I can maybe sneak in on some other facilitating things because I love these. Even if I'm at UCM, but it's fine, I'll figure it out. But just for the final, anyone does have any final thoughts or final questions or just any responses, I would love to hear them. And again, I thank you guys all so much for sharing these.
This has been a really great event, and I really want to thank Dennis and Coda for being phenomenal facilitators. I really respect what you've done and appreciate your candor and your openness to people. It's really impressive. Thank you.
I think I can say from Dennis and I both, we appreciate that very much. And we put in a lot of hard work to make these things happen, but him and I, we do it naturally and we enjoy these. And I think that's the most important thing. Thank you guys for everyone in the comments. I really appreciate all that.
Coda, I'm going to jump in and go on and wrap it up so that, thank you so much, so that we can kind of get everybody out at a good time. Our identity is shaped, as I mentioned at the beginning of this event, our identity is shaped through the many cultures that we are part of. And culture shock happens when we experience that jolt to our culture, to our cultural awareness. But this jolt actually leads to an evolution in our identity, as so many of you pointed out. And when we move from one space to another space, our identity adapts and it evolves and it grows. college gives you the choice and the freedom to form that identity for yourself. And at the same time, as I believe it was Bradley pointed out, it gives us the new perspectives and knowledge and information of meeting new people that also help us grow our identities. This can cause culture shock, of course, but it also makes us more solidified in terms of who our identity is by getting to know people that have multiple stories that help us grow our single story. And in life and in college and with family and friends, we're often forced into a single story. But the reality is that we are much more complex than a single story. We are multifaceted, we are intersectional, we are interwoven, and we are always fluid, and our identity is always evolving. And so we hope today that one of the things you walk away with is that you allow yourself the privilege of these identities, and that you also allow others to be safe in their identities in your space. And so we would like to thank all of you for coming today. I know it's not easy to be in one of these events in the evening, but it helps us all grow and evolve and learn from each other. A couple quick items. I would like to say that there's going to be another event in April. There's going to be a screening of the movie Coded Bias, which I cannot wait to see. So I'm really excited about doing that. So please tune into Blackboard for more information on that coming up. The other thing I would like to take a moment to do is just to thank the team around me. Katie and Crystal kind of got forced into this. They're like, oh, I'd love to help. And then I'm like, great, here's your to-do list. And they immediately had a million things to do. And Coda and Dennis also never really get a choice in this. I'm like, oh, I'm doing an event. You guys are on board. But what you don't see, why they are also graciously here facilitating and doing what you see on the screen, is I am sending them about 1 million text messages a minute, and I'm changing things in the agenda and the Google Docs. There are 1 million things happening, and they are smoothly multitasking as if nothing is going on. And so I appreciate their willingness and their magic ability to do all of that during this event for you guys. So thank you to the team for everything that you do as always. And I thank you for all of you for coming to tonight's event. I really appreciate it. And if that's that, so if the facilitators can stay behind, I would appreciate it so we can just wrap up. But other than that, thank you everybody for attending.
Thank you. Thanks, Cynthia, for all your work too.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'm taking a minute to read the chats because I didn't get to read them while I was talking.
Yeah, I didn't get to read it. I was just
Me
focused on
neither.
what you were saying.
I just saw that people were saying have nice things, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
You guys did so well.
Thank you.
So amazing. Cynthia, you're a machine behind the scenes.
I'm what?
You're a machine behind the scenes.
That's my old
Really are.
planning days. Yes, I'm like 20 different. I can't just sit still and like listen to the event. I'm really bad about that. I have to be like always thinking ahead. Let's see. Oh, I liked Marissa's comment. She's
I know,
new to
I
my
did too.
class. She's very quiet in class too, but she's very insightful.
I think that's the nice thing about these is that even if you don't
Yeah.
feel comfortable talking, you can hear and you can absorb everything.
Yeah, that's one thing I
I
really love
agree.
about this.
So I wanted to say a couple quick things, and I know we're all tired and we want to go, but I just wanted to say, you know, with all the other events that we've put on like this, the topic has been specific, the objective has been clear, the conversation might be more challenging. This conversation, I think, was more positive, more opening, but the objective wasn't as clear. It was a much more difficult thing for us to kind of do behind the scenes. And I just really am grateful for all of you guys for pulling this off. I could not have done it on my own. And from Crystal and Katie, for Crystal, you're with me from day one, and I really appreciate that. And just help jumping on board with me and kind of riding this ride. And same thing, Katie, you just hopped right on. And Dennis and Coda, I don't know what I'm gonna do next year without you. And
That's what I was saying. If there's a way for me to like help out from UCM, let me.
Well, you know how much Dr. Meyer loves you too, so he would probably allow that. But yeah, I'm gonna miss you guys, and you know that already. And I'm very proud of again. And you would not believe the amount of people in that room that were sending me text messages, completely impressed with you guys. So thank you for all your hard work, everybody.
I would just like to say this started with a very messed up documentary that we really didn't know what to do with. And I think that, but like no one would have known that. Like no one knows that in the thing. And I think that's what makes it 10 times better is that we look like
No
this
one knows
very
it.
well put together like group and we're like, yo, we started from literally nothing.
Yeah, we made some really hard ass lemonade today. Like we got some really crappy lemons and we made some Mike's Hard lemonade. Like we did it.
We made some Mike's Harder lemonade.
Yeah.
Dude, we made chicken salad out of chicken shit. I don't know how we did it. We pulled out a miracle there.
Totally. Yeah, we did. We like, oh man, I'm glad you reminded us of the Coda because we can, I mean, tonight's event was
That's what I was
amazing
thinking
and
of, and I
nobody
was like,
knows.
I really wanted to say that in the thing, but I also wanted to keep it just a secret between us. I'm like, I
Yeah.
think people would be blown away by that, but I'm like, it's our little secret.
You're like,
No
I
one
want
needs to
people
know.
to know how shitty we started off. All right. Well, I know a lot of you have kids and you need to go, and I do too. So a bath time is in 3 minutes. But again, thank you guys.
Yeah,
so
me
much.
and my children, we're gonna go do homework.
Yeah.
Yes,
you
I am.
better. I know your teachers.
Yeah, you do. That's scary.
All right. We'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye, guys. Have a good
Yeah.
night.